Hello friends, I am Dr. Kuldeep Mohadikar. In this video, I will present my 37th chapter entitled as Matthew Arnold's Theory of Poetry from my series Literary Pearls. Matthew Arnold was not only a great poet but also a great critic of the Victorian age. He was a critic of literature as well as critic of social, economic and religious life of his times. In which age he lived, it was an age of spiritual decay and materialism. Due to the advancement of science, religion had lost its grip on the mind of a man. Besides this, he was very much dissatisfied with the kind of poetry written in his own age and he reacted against it. Like Carlyle, he felt that religion must be dynamic and not static. Educated man can no longer believe in anthropomorphic. Educated man should believe in religion and spirituality. Till the death, Arnold reacted against it and says that the future of poetry is immense because of poetry, where it is worthy of its high destiny that our race, as time goes on, will find ever surer and surer way. As Hugh Walker remarks, Arnold's definition of poetry as a criticism of life is true of Arnold's verse. Even in the literary sense, there is a great amount of judicious criticism in Arnold's verse. Arnold's poetry is chiefly critical of life. Poetry, according to Arnold, is a criticism of life under the condition fixed for such criticism by the laws of poetic truth and poetic beauty. I quote, uh, sorry, in poetry of this kind, the spirit of our race will find as time goes on and other helps fail its consolation and stay. But consolation and stay will be the power of criticism of life. He explains in the following lines, I quote, the greatness of poet lies in this powerful and beautiful application of ideas to life. I unquote. To the question how to live, again he says, I quote, poetry, however, the criticism of life has to be made the law of poetic truth and poetic beauty. I unquote. Referring to Arnold's definition of poetry as a criticism of life, Garrard interprets it by quoting Edward Cade, who says that, I quote, literature is criticism of life, exactly in the sense that a good is a criticism of a bad one. T.S. Eliot feels that definition of poetry, criticism of life, is inadequate. J.D. Jump says that there can be no excuse for not knowing what Arnold meant by criticism, a disinterested attempt to see things as they are, in the course of which value judgment naturally and almost insensibly from themselves. Middleton Murray says that believes that poetry is a criticism of the ugly. Elton says that criticism of life implies something that would illumine and inspire us for the business of living. Arnold always seeks to idealize life. That explains why Shelley's Skylark echoes to be a bird of flesh and blood, uh, born to die. The Nightingale of Keats is a high earned portrait of the bird that stands for unattainable beauty. Life is crude, raw, and often vulgar. No poet was a criticism of the Victorian age as Arnold. In most of his poems, we find his criticism of the poets, the people, and condition of his time. In all his deepest poems, in Scholar Gypsy, Dover Beach, Thyrsis Memorial, that and a southern light, we were the poets passing and judgment on the like of his age, the like of country, the living individual men. In memorial verses, Arnold speaks of Goethe Byron as physician of the Iron Age. Byron is hailed as thunder's roll and as the pond of fiery life. Wordsworth's hitting power is uh, also described. In the stanza from Grande, characterized, Shelley is represented as a poet priest to us all the wonder and bloom of the world. But like Browning, Arnold could not say, I quote, God in his heaven and all is right with the world. I unquote. According to Arnold, there is no difference between art and morality. He says a poetry of revolt against moral idea is poetry against life. A poetry of indifference towards moral ideas is a poetry of indifference towards life. When Arnold plead for treating in poetry moral ideas, he does not mean composing moral poems that bring us but a very little way in poetry. In this connection, he says, in it is said that to call these ideas moral ideas is to introduce a strong and injurious limitations. I answer that it is to do nothing of the kind because moral ideas are really so main part of human life. The question how to live is itself moralized, and it is a question which more interest every man, and with which in same way or other he is perpetually occupied. A large sense is of course to be given the term moral. Whatever bears upon the question how to live comes under it. I quote, nor love thy life, nor hate, but what thou live well how, long or short. I unquote. In those lines, Milton utters, everyone once pursues moral idea. Yes, but be so too when kids consoles the forward bending lover on the Grecian urn, the lover arrested and presented in immoral relief by a sculptor's hand before he can kiss, which the line, I quote, forever will thou love and she be fair, I unquote. He utters a moral idea when Shakespeare says that, I quote, we are such stuff as dreams are made of, and our little life is rounded with a sleep, I unquote. Arnold's poetry critically presents the growing of materialism of the modern age, and his poetry would teach us how to live. The growing conflict between science and religion, doubt and faith, is revealed in Scholar Gypsy. I quote, thou waitest for the spark from heaven, and we light half believers for our casual creeds who never deeply felt nor clearly willed. I unquote. Aging the poem, Scholar Gypsy's advice to the Scholar Gypsy for fly from hopeless world of the people of his age when he says, I quote, but fly our paths, our feverish contact fly, for strong the infection of our mental strife, which through it gives bobblish, it spoils rest, which though it gives no bliss but spoil the rest. I unquote. Again in his Daw Beach, Arnold says that modern man has lost faith in God and religion and struggling between unfaithfulness when he says, I quote, nor certitude, nor peace, nor hell for pain, and we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarm of struggle, and where ignorant armies clash by night. I unquote. That is all about Matthew Arnold's theory of poetry. Thanks, friends.